What if the most powerful wealth invention in human history was not money, not gold, not banks, not paper currency, but land? Thousands of years before the Naira, before cowries, before trade routes across West Africa, a quiet revolution changed human civilization forever. A revolution that determined who would become powerful, who would control societies, and who would spend generations working for others. That revolution was agriculture. Before farming, wealth could not be stored. A hunter could bring down a large animal today, but tomorrow the meat would rot. Energy created value, but value disappeared quickly. No inheritance, no generational wealth, no empires. But when humans discovered that land could produce food again and again, everything changed. Land created production. Production created surplus. Surplus created power. And power created the first real wealth systems in human history. This is the story of how land transformed civilization, how it shaped early African kingdoms, and how understanding this ancient shift may change the way you see money today. Because if you misunderstand how wealth evolved, you may spend your entire life chasing income instead of building power. Today, ask someone in Lagos, what is wealth? Most people will say, money in the bank, salary, a big house, a car. But very few people ask a deeper question: where does wealth actually come from? Students believe money comes from their parents. Workers believe money comes from their employer. Entrepreneurs believe money comes from business profit. But history shows something deeper. Money itself is not the origin of wealth. Money is simply a representation of value. Before money existed, wealth still existed. And for thousands of years, the most powerful form of wealth on earth was land. This idea still influences Nigeria today. When families discuss success, they often say, buy land. Why? Because deep in our collective memory, land still represents power, security, and legacy. But the modern world has changed, and to understand why, we must go back to the moment when humanity stopped wandering the forests and started cultivating the earth. Let's break this down with a simple example. Imagine two individuals living 8,000 years ago. Person is a hunter. Every day he must hunt to eat. If he catches something today, he eats. If he fails tomorrow, he goes hungry. His wealth resets every single day. Now imagine Person B, a farmer. Person B plants crops. One seed becomes 10 crops. 10 crops become a harvest. The harvest feeds the family and leaves surplus. That surplus can be stored. If the farmer plants 100 seeds and harvests 1,000 crops, that is 900 units of surplus wealth. This is the mathematical birth of economic power. Production greater than consumption, surplus greater than survival. And once surplus exists, wealth can accumulate. When wealth accumulates, power structures emerge. Let's pause for a moment. Here is a question for you. Think carefully. Which of these created the first true wealth system in human history? A. Hunting skill. B. Land ownership. C. Physical strength. I'll give you 5 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The answer is B. Land ownership. Why? Because land allowed value to reproduce itself. Strength can disappear. Skill can fade. But land continues producing generation after generation. This is why kings, empires, and kingdoms were built around land. And the same principle still applies today. Real wealth is not about working harder. Real wealth is about owning systems that produce value repeatedly. The end of the hunter era. For most of human history, survival depended entirely on movement. Humans lived as hunter-gatherers. They moved through forests, grasslands, and rivers searching for food. When animals migrated, humans followed. When fruits disappeared from a region, communities moved again. Nothing was permanent. A person's value depended almost entirely on their physical ability. If you were strong, you could hunt. If you were skilled, you could track animals or gather edible plants. But there was a major limitation in this system. Wealth could not accumulate. A successful hunter might bring home a large animal today, but within a few days, the meat would spoil. The wealth created by that effort disappeared quickly. There was no way to store large amounts of food for long periods. This meant one important thing: every day, survival started again from zero. No matter how skilled someone was yesterday, they still had to work again tomorrow just to survive. This system kept humanity in a constant survival cycle. There was no long-term accumulation. No inherited wealth. No large cities. No complex governments. Human societies were small, mobile, and equal in terms of survival power. But then something extraordinary happened. Humans discovered something that would permanently change civilization. They discovered that plants could be grown intentionally, the agricultural discovery. Around 10,000 BCE, in several parts of the world, humans began experimenting with planting seeds. Instead of only collecting plants growing in the wild, people began planting them near their settlements. They noticed something remarkable. Seeds planted in the soil would grow into crops. Those crops produced even more seeds, and those seeds could be planted again. For the first time in human history, food production could multiply itself. Instead of chasing food across the land, humans could make food grow from the land. This discovery changed everything. People began settling permanently in one place. Villages formed. Families built homes. Communities grew. And something new appeared in human society. Surplus. The birth of stored wealth. Surplus simply means producing more than what is immediately needed for survival. A farming family might need 100 baskets of grain to survive the year. But if their farm produces 300 baskets, that means they have 200 baskets of surplus. For the first time in human history, wealth could be stored, food could be kept for future use, and this changed the entire structure of society. Because when surplus exists, no possibilities appear. Food could be traded. Food could support people who were not farmers. Food could support soldiers, artisans, traders, and rulers. Surplus allowed societies to grow larger and more complex. And as farming expanded, one resource became more valuable than anything else. That resource was land. Land becomes the most valuable asset. Land became the most powerful wealth generator in early civilizations. Why? Because land produced food, and food sustained life. The more land someone controlled, the more food they could produce. The more food they produced, the more people they could support. And the more people they supported, the more power they gained. This is how the first large social hierarchies emerged. Some individuals or families began controlling large areas of land. Others worked on that land, and gradually, societies began dividing into economic classes. The birth of social classes. Once land became the central source of wealth, societies began organizing around land ownership. This created some of the earliest economic classes in human history. At the top were rulers and kings. These individuals controlled large territories and protected them through military power. Below them were landowners or nobles. They controlled farmland and received a share of the crops produced by workers. Then came peasants and laborers. These individuals worked the land but did not own it. Their survival depended on access to farmland controlled by others. This structure created the early foundations of political power. Landowners influenced governments. Kings protected territories. Workers produced food. This system dominated human civilization for thousands of years. And variations of it appeared in many regions of the world, including Africa. Labor expansion and the economic role of polygamy. Agriculture required large amounts of labor. Land needed to be cleared. Crops needed to be planted. Harvests needed to be collected and stored. In agrarian societies, the number of people available to work the land directly affected production levels. This influenced family structures. In many farming societies, including parts of Africa, larger families meant more labor power. More children meant more workers. In some regions, polygamy became part of this agricultural system. Multiple wives meant larger families. Larger families meant more farm labor. More labor meant greater agricultural production. This was not purely cultural. It also had a clear economic logic. Families that could mobilize more labor produced more food. More food meant more surplus, and more surplus meant greater wealth and influence. This dynamic shaped many early communities, agrarian systems in pre-colonial Africa. Across Africa, agriculture supported the growth of powerful societies long before colonial rule. Farming communities cultivated crops suited to local climates and environments. Food production supported population growth and trade networks. In what is now Nigeria, many societies developed complex political and economic structures built around agriculture. Two notable examples include the Oyo Empire and the Benin Kingdom. Both kingdoms developed sophisticated political systems. They organized land use, trade routes, taxation, and governance. Agriculture formed the backbone of their economies. Farmers produced crops such as yam, millet, and other staple foods. These foods supported large populations, and those populations supported armies, traders, and artisans. But agriculture alone did not define their power. Trade played a major role in expanding wealth. Trade networks across West Africa. As agricultural production increased, communities began exchanging goods with neighboring regions. Trade networks expanded across West Africa. Farm products moved between communities. Salt from desert regions traveled south. Textiles, metals, and crafted goods circulated through markets. These exchanges allowed communities to access resources not available locally. Over time, certain cities and regions became major trade hubs. Merchants traveled long distances connecting communities. And as trade expanded, societies needed something to simplify exchange. Barter had limitations. If a farmer wanted salt but the salt trader wanted cloth instead of crops, trade became complicated. So societies gradually adopted standardized items used as money. In West Africa, one of the most widely used forms of early currency was the cowrie shell. Cowries were small, durable shells imported through trade networks. They became widely recognized as a medium of exchange. Instead of directly trading crops for tools, people could trade crops for cowries and then use those cowries to buy other goods. This made trade more efficient. Money was evolving again. But even as currencies developed, the foundation of wealth in these societies remained the same. Control over productive resources, especially land. The foundation for future economic systems. The agrarian revolution created the first large economic systems in human history. It allowed wealth to be stored. It allowed societies to grow. It allowed governments and kingdoms to emerge. And it introduced a powerful idea that still shapes the world today. The idea that ownership of productive assets creates lasting wealth. In agrarian societies, that asset was land. In later centuries, factories would replace farmland. In the modern world, digital platforms, knowledge, and technology have become the new engines of wealth. But the underlying principle has never changed. Those who control productive systems shape economic power, and those who do not must rely on selling their labor inside those systems. Understanding this historical shift is essential for understanding money today. Because the story of land becoming wealth is not just ancient history, it is the foundation of how modern economies still function. In this episode, we explore a framework I called the seeds of power. Imagine a quiet morning thousands of years ago. The sun rises slowly over a wide open field. The air is cool. Mist floats gently above the soil. Standing in the middle of that field is a young farmer. His hands are rough from work. His feet press into the earth that will determine the future of his family. In his hand are small seeds. To someone passing by, those seeds might look insignificant, just tiny grains. But inside those seeds lies something powerful, possibility. The farmer kneels down and presses the seeds into the soil, one by one, row after row. Then he waits. Days pass, rain falls. The sun warms the land. Slowly, small green shoots break through the soil. Weeks later, those shoots become crops. The land begins to produce food. More food than the farmer's family can eat in one day. Then more than they can eat in a week. Then more than they need for the entire season. For the first time, the farmer experiences something humanity had rarely seen before: surplus. Food that is not immediately needed for survival. Food that can be stored. Food that can be traded. Food that represents wealth. The farmer stores the harvest inside clay containers. Months later, travelers from another village arrive. They bring tools made from stronger materials, tools that can cut deeper into the soil. Tools that make farming faster. The farmer offers them grain. In exchange, they give him tools. That exchange changes everything. With better tools, the farmer clears more land. With more land, he plants more seeds. With more seeds, the harvest grows larger. The next year, the surplus is even bigger. Years pass, the farmer's children grow older. They help cultivate the land. They expand the fields. What began as a small farm becomes a large productive system. By the time the farmer becomes old, something extraordinary has happened. His family no longer worries about survival. The land continues producing food. Even when he is resting, even when he is asleep, even when he is gone. When the farmer eventually dies, his children inherit the land. But they inherit something far greater than soil. They inherit a system of production. A system that continues generating value every season. Their wealth does not come from working harder than everyone else. It comes from controlling something that produces value repeatedly. That something is land. Now imagine another man living in the same village. He wakes up every morning before sunrise. He walks to the same fields. But the land he works does not belong to him. Every season he plants crops. Every harvest he works long hours collecting food. But when the harvest is finished, most of the crops go to the landowner. He receives only a portion, just enough to survive. Next season, the same cycle begins again. He works hard, but his work builds wealth for someone else. His survival depends on access to land he does not control. This quiet economic difference creates two very different futures. One family builds wealth across generations. The other survives one season at a time. And this story was not unique. It repeated itself across civilizations, across Africa, across Europe, across Asia, across the Middle East. Wherever agriculture spread, the same pattern emerged. Those who controlled productive land accumulated wealth. Those who did not relied on labor. Over time, this difference shaped entire societies. Kings ruled territories, landowners controlled farms. Peasants cultivated crops. Economic power concentrated around those who controlled the most productive resources. And this reveals one of the deepest truths in the history of money. Wealth rarely comes from effort alone. Effort matters, skill matters. But lasting wealth usually comes from controlling systems that produce value repeatedly. Thousands of years ago, that system was land. And understanding that truth helps us understand the evolution of wealth itself. Because as this series continues, the productive systems that create wealth will keep changing. First it was human energy, then it was land. Later it will become factories, then financial systems. And today, in the digital age, it is evolving again. But the underlying principle remains the same. Those who control the systems that produce value shape the future of wealth, and those who understand this principle early position themselves to become the first wealth builders in their family. Which brings us back to the central idea of this episode. The moment humans learned to cultivate land, they did not just invent farming. They invented the first scalable wealth system in human history, and that discovery would shape civilization for thousands of years. The agrarian system dominated the world for thousands of years. But eventually, another revolution arrived. The Industrial Revolution. Factories replaced farms as the most powerful wealth generators. Machines replaced manual labor, cities expanded, workers earned wages. This is where the salary system began. Later, global financial systems evolved. Currencies became tied to gold. Then the Bretton Woods system linked global currencies to the US dollar. In 1971, the Nixon shock ended the gold standard entirely. Most money today is fiat currency, money backed by government authority rather than physical assets. Nigeria operates within this global system today. But the deeper economic principle remains unchanged. Wealth flows toward productive systems. What money really is, after thousands of years of human civilization. After hunters chased animals across forests. After farmers turned land into wealth. After kingdoms rose and fell. After currencies appeared and disappeared. A deeper question still remains. What exactly is money? Most people think money is the paper in their wallet. Others think money is the numbers inside their bank account. Some believe money is the salary they receive at the end of the month. But those are not money itself. They are only representations, symbols, tools. The real nature of money is far deeper. To understand it, we must strip away everything modern society has added to the concept of money. We must go back to the foundation. At its core, money represents something very human: time. Every product you buy, every service you receive, every building, road, phone, or piece of technology exists because someone spent time and energy creating it. Time is the one resource every human being possesses equally at birth. But once time is used, it can never be recovered. Money is the mechanism societies invented to store that time. When someone works, They exchange their time and energy for money. That money becomes a stored representation of the value they created. Later, they can exchange that stored value for something someone else created. This is why money is often described as stored human time. But that is only the first layer. Money is also transferable value. Imagine a farmer producing surplus crops thousands of years ago. That surplus represented value, but crops would spoil over time. They could not easily be transported across long distances. So societies created something easier to move: currency, cowrie shells, coins, paper notes, digital balances. Each new form of money made value easier to transfer. Instead of carrying sacks of grain across villages, a trader could carry small shells. Instead of transporting heavy metals, people used paper. Instead of paper, today we use digital numbers. The form changes, but the underlying purpose remains the same. Money allows value to move from one person to another, from one city to another, from one generation to another. But there is an even deeper truth. Money is also proof that a problem has been solved. Think about it carefully. People do not give money randomly. Money moves toward value, and value comes from solving problems. The farmer solved the problem of food production. The trader solved the problem of distribution. The blacksmith solved the problem of tools. The builder solved the problem of shelter. Each solution created value, and money flowed toward those solutions. This is why some individuals earn very little, while others earn enormous amounts of money. The difference is rarely just effort, it is usually impact. The scale of the problem being solved. A person who fixes a bicycle for one customer solves a small problem. A person who builds a transportation system solves a much larger problem. The greater the value created for society, the greater the economic reward tends to be. This leads to another important truth about money. Money rewards scale. A farmer feeding his family creates value. A farmer feeding a village creates more value. A farmer feeding a nation creates enormous value. The scale of impact determines the scale of wealth. This is why modern technology companies become billion-dollar businesses. They solve problems for millions of people at once. But there is still another layer to this truth. Money also follows systems. In the hunter era, wealth depended on daily effort. If the hunter stopped hunting, the food stopped. In the agrarian era, land created a system. Once crops were planted, the land continued producing harvests. In the industrial era, machines became systems. Factories could produce thousands of goods daily. In the modern era, digital platforms have become the most powerful systems of all. Software, networks, and digital infrastructure can serve millions of people simultaneously. Understanding this evolution changes how we see wealth. If someone believes money comes only from working harder, they will focus entirely on labor. But history shows that the largest wealth has always come from owning systems of production. Hunters produced food with energy. Farmers produced food with land. Industrialists produced goods with machines. Modern innovators produce value with networks, platforms, and ideas. The form of wealth creation evolves, but the principle remains constant. Money flows toward those who create value at scale through systems. This is the deep truth most people never learn. And because they never learn it, they spend their lives chasing money directly. Working longer hours, searching for higher salaries, trying to save more from limited income. But money itself is not the target. Value creation is the target. When value expands, money follows. This idea sits at the heart of becoming the first millionaire in your family. The goal is not just to earn income. The goal is to understand the systems that create wealth. The goal is to move from trading time to creating value that can reach many people. Once that shift happens in a person's thinking, everything begins to change. Work becomes strategic, opportunities become clearer, and the path toward wealth stops feeling mysterious, because you begin to see the invisible forces that have shaped money for thousands of years. And when you understand those forces, you stop chasing money blindly. You start building the systems that attract it. Why does this matter today? Because every era has its dominant wealth system. Hunter-era energy created wealth. Agrarian-era land created wealth. Industrial-era factories created wealth. Today, knowledge, technology, digital systems. The modern equivalent of land is leverage, platforms, businesses, intellectual property, networks. If someone only trades time for salary, they operate at the lowest level of wealth creation. But when someone builds systems that produce value repeatedly, they step into a different economic level. This is the philosophy behind becoming the first millionaire in your family. This episode teaches 5 powerful lessons. First, wealth is always tied to productive systems. Hunters work daily for survival. Farmers build systems that produce surplus. Modern wealth builders must create systems that generate value beyond their daily labor. Second, ownership determines influence. Those who owned land controlled food production, trade, and labor. In today's world, ownership might mean owning businesses, intellectual property, or digital platforms. Third, wealth multiplies through leverage. Farmers produced more than they consumed. That surplus allowed trade and expansion. Modern wealth works the same way. Leverage amplifies productivity. Fourth, generational wealth requires assets that survive time. Energy disappears. But productive assets continue generating value long after their creator. Fifth, economic awareness changes life direction. When someone understands how wealth evolves, they stop chasing money blindly and start building systems. To apply these lessons, begin developing valuable skills. Study economic history. Look for ways to build scalable systems. Save and invest strategically. Think beyond income toward ownership. This is how ordinary individuals transform into wealth creators. The story of money is the story of civilization itself, from hunters in ancient forests, to farmers cultivating the earth, to kingdoms rising across Africa. Wealth has always evolved, but the deeper lesson remains the same. Those who understand the system shape the future. Those who do not work inside it. If this series is opening your eyes to how money truly works, then the next step is even more important. The ideas in this documentary are only the beginning. In my book, The First Millionaire in Your Family, we go much deeper. Readers from different backgrounds have shared how the book helped them rethink income, build wealth systems, and change their financial direction. The book is not just about making money. It is about understanding the blueprint of wealth creation. If you want to start that journey, you can find the book through the link in the description. And if you believe this knowledge can change how people understand money, support the mission. Like the video, share it, and subscribe to the channel. Because in the next episode, we explore the next stage of the money revolution. The moment when trade, currency, and global exchange began reshaping the world. And the question you should ask yourself tonight is simple. If money has evolved for thousands of years, will you evolve with it, or will you remain stuck in the economic rules of the past? For thousands of years, land was the most powerful source of wealth. Whoever controlled land controlled food. And whoever controlled food controlled power. But land had a limitation. It worked well for villages. It worked for kingdoms. But as civilizations grew, something began to break. Farmers produced grain. Blacksmiths produced tools. Fishermen caught fish, but trade had a problem. Imagine you grow yams, but you need salt. You go to the salt trader. But the salt trader doesn't want yams. He wants cloth. Now the entire trade stops. This problem slowed down entire economies, and civilizations across the world needed a solution. A system that could make exchange easier. A system that could measure value. A system that could move wealth across cities, kingdoms, and eventually continents. That solution would give birth to something that would change human civilization forever. Money as currency, not energy, not land. But something portable, something measurable, something universal. And in the next episode, we explore one of the most fascinating chapters in the history of African economies. How trade expanded across West Africa. How markets connected distant kingdoms. And how small objects like cowrie shells became powerful money systems long before modern banks existed. Because before the naira, before colonial currency, before modern finance, West Africa already had its own money system. And understanding that story may completely change how you see African economic history. So in the next episode, we uncover the rise of trade and cowrie money in West Africa. And trust me, this is a chapter of the money revolution you don't want to miss.